You're listening to the Leading Healthy Creative Teams podcast with Matt Curtis. This is the podcast that helps you take your creative team from wherever you are today to healthy and effective.
Hey friends, thank you so much for joining me this week on the Leading Healthy Creative Teams podcast. This week, I'm going to talk about promotion strategies and why these are actually important to the health and well-being of you as a creative. But this is also going to function as a setup episode for next week. I had a great conversation with Dennis and Micah from Real Life Church in Las Cruces, New Mexico. Dennis posted something a while back about really a promotional tiered approach to ministry. It was incredible. It was far deeper than I've seen anyone go in terms of the way to structure your promotional schedule. Because of that, I reached out and I said, Dennis, we got to talk. Can we unpack this? And the conversation that unfolded with Dennis and Micah was fantastic. I'm very excited for you to hear it. I actually think this has the potential to be incredibly transformational for your church in terms of the way that you view the role of a promotional schedule. But it also does something else, and this is why I'm not releasing that episode this week. I wanted to give it a little bit of a preface. For the creative that's struggling to be heard by leadership, you keep presenting these ideas, you keep presenting new strategies, new creative approaches to communicate, new strategies for communication, and you just keep getting told no. You're going to realize why you're being told no next week. The reason I say that is because Dennis and Micah do an incredible job of really unpacking how deeply cultural these types of problems are. So the promotional calendar, or really the promotional strategy that they put forward, is a culture tool. It is a tool to shift the way that people behave in the organization so that they are more aligned with the mission of the church. Now, the reason I say that is because if you're getting no's from leadership, there's a very good chance it's because you're not speaking the language of leadership. We talked about that recently on the podcast. I want to point you to two things. One, I want to point you to next week's episode. It's going to help you begin to understand why calm initiatives are often rejected by leadership, because they're overreaching, often unintentionally, but they're overreaching and they're really culture-shifting tools. That's not your role as a communications leader. Now, you may see that there is a need for those changes, absolutely. But when you present a solution to a problem and it creates 5 more problems, you're going to get a no, because leadership's going to see the consequences of those changes and of those initiatives. I also want to use this as an opportunity to point you to the creative leadership cohort that I'm launching. This is exactly the reason why I've built it. I spent the majority of my career presenting new creative initiatives, and leadership continued to tell me no. It wasn't until I made this shift to thinking like a leader, understanding the language of leadership, not even necessarily managing people. This is not a people management conversation. This is, you need to understand the language of the people that you're working with. In the case of the church, you're going to be presenting your ideas to leadership. Leadership will always trump the authority of the creatives on the team. It always should. Scripture is very clear that creatives aren't the one leading the church. That's not who God calls to be in leadership of the church. So if you have any hope of being heard as a creative, because I do think there's value in what creatives bring to the organization, but if you have any hope at all of being heard and helping the church leverage the horsepower of creativity, you're going to have to make the transition into thinking like a leader. And so the cohort is designed for this specific purpose. Over the course of 7 weeks, we have a small group. That's kind of how I look at it. It's a creative leadership small group. You're going to go through this cohort together with 7 or 8 other creatives who are all looking to make this same stretch, this growth movement into leadership. Not as a formal title, not as a position on the org chart, but understanding how you can present the values or the ideas or the initiatives that you're seeing an opportunity to accomplish from the creative perspective. You're going to be able to learn those things together with a group of people, all for the purpose of helping you communicate more effectively with leadership. And in a lot of ways, it's going to do what next week's episode is going to do, which is help you see the implications of the decisions that you're making from a communications or a creative perspective. It's going to help you broaden your horizons to say, oh, maybe the reason that we're not moving forward on this initiative is actually an organizational thing. Maybe it's a cultural thing. Maybe it's not as missional as I thought it was. I just want to encourage you, again, the creative leadership cohort and also next week's episode. So what are we going to talk about in this episode? I want to talk to you about the idea of a promotional strategy. This is a case study that's on the Lunchtime Heroes website. You can go to lunchtimeheroes.co. You'll find it under case studies, and it's called promotional strategy. I want to walk through this with you because this is a really great foundation to then understand how Real Life Church has taken it a step further, because they have, and it's a phenomenal step further, but it's also a step further that is outside of COM. COM should not be proposing something like this. This is very much a leadership-driven initiative. But what it also does is it elevates how much better our ideas get when we stop thinking exclusively in our creative verticals and we stop thinking just in, oh, well, my creative team came up with this idea. Nobody else should touch it. That's not going to get you the most traction in the organization. And frankly, it's going to limit the impact of your ideas. And that's what we see next week. So this week, let's talk about this idea of what a promotional calendar or what a promotional strategy even is for the events that you are going to be putting out or the organization is going to be putting out. This has been one of the areas where I've actually seen the most shift happen in the church today. So right now it is March 2023, and the promotional strategy is one of the most fluid and constantly changing things based on the nature of the attention of our people, but also the communication channels that are open for people to leverage, for the church to leverage. So if you go to the page and you find the document, I'm actually going to send this out as the freebie. I'm going to do a twofer here on the Creative Bites email. I'm going to send out the document from Real Life Church. They just have it's like a screenshot. So I'll pretty it up a little bit so that you can get a sense of what the text is and what the purpose is behind their promotional strategy. But then I'm also going to send the PDF documents that I used in this presentation that I'm going to walk through here. But we're going to talk about what goes into making a promotional strategy. The first thing here is you're going to have to evaluate your ministries. And this is always the part right here. When I presented this concept as a creative leader, every single time I did, there was this, you could see this cringe and this, no. This real hesitation for leadership to buy into this idea of rating or grading or valuing your ministries. But here's what I want to say. You're not going to be able to successfully communicate everything as an equal in your ministry. It's just not possible. Not every ministry event moves the mission at the same level. You have some things that are going to be exposure oriented. Man, this is a great thing to bring a non-believer to. This is a great way to get attention in the community. This is a great way for us to live out the values of our church. And then there's other events that these are really good to grow the individuals on the inside of the church. And so they're, discipleship oriented. This is a class that's going to grow your understanding of God's word, those types of things. Those should all fall in different extremes in terms of how much energy you're putting behind them as an organization, as a creative team. So the way that I describe it, and I know that it's off-putting language for some, so bear with me in that, but also recognize that this is one of those tensions when it comes to presenting to leadership. If you present using language that doesn't work for them, it's a problem. We sat down and we said, okay, how are we going to do this? We don't want to value our organization ministries as important to not important, because that's not actually true. So what we did is we looked at the mission of our church. And this is what's unique about a promotional strategy like this. You can go to my website and you can download this tool. You can copy and paste it. That's fine. But it's really not going to be an appropriate reflection of what your church's mission is. Promotional strategies like this really are best when they are crafted specifically for the church that you serve at. And so that means that if you go to one church, you serve there for a while, you craft a promotional schedule or a promotional strategy. You go to another church, you should start over. You shouldn't just take the same promotional strategy. Now, the framework, absolutely, and I think that's the value of having this on the website. The framework is going to be very similar. You're going to define your mission. I'm actually doing this for a church next month. I'm going to go to their place. I'm going to talk to their ministry team. I'm going to say, okay, who are you guys? What do you care about? What is the mission of this church? And then once we have that defined, it's going to trickle down into everything else that happens. It's going to trickle into the way that their social media looks. It's going to trickle into the way that they communicate internally to their own team, to their own staff, to their own congregation, and to the way that they present themselves to the community outside. So who you are really matters when it comes to promotional strategy. So that was our first question. Who are we as High Desert Church? That's the church that is the focus of this case study. Okay, we are a church that believes very much in this thing called oikos. Basically what it is, the mission statement of the church, preparing every generation to change their worlds for Christ. So the job of High Desert Church is to prepare everyone, every generation, young, medium-aged, and old, everywhere on that spectrum of age, we want to prepare you to change your world for Christ. What does your world mean? Your world means the people that God has put in your life. The term oikos is 8 to 15 people. That's kind of the language that we use. It's the people that God has supernaturally and strategically placed in your sphere of influence. That's the language that we would use all the time. So what does that mean? That means think about the people that are in your life that God has put you in relationship with. It could be the people that you're in school with. It could be the people that you work alongside. It could be the people that you live in the neighborhood of. It's your neighbor on each side. So it's not a transactional relationship necessarily, but it's those people that you go beyond that with. The way I always explain it is, let's say that I'm here, sitting here, you're listening to this podcast, you're watching this episode on YouTube. I'm sitting here and I'm telling you, look, man, I'm just saying you should buy a Toyota pickup truck. Okay, you don't know me beyond this interaction that we're having, which is really, I'm going to say something and then you can reply in the comments. Like that's the level of connectedness that we have. You can take my word for it if you want, if I've somehow managed to build enough trust with you. But the reality is if you have a friend in your oikos, in your circle of friends or circle of close relationships, and they have experience with vehicles, they're a mechanic, or maybe they're a shade tree mechanic, but they know cars. You trust their opinion more than your own and more than mine. If they say, I actually think you should buy a Ford truck, you're probably going to rely on their advice more than my advice. The other thing is they're going to watch what you do. They're going to see what it looks like for you to behave with regards to the cars that you have. So if you have a certain car and you're complaining about it all the time, I've had some friends over the years who have been, they work on their cars. They know their cars better than anything. But then I hear them complain about a certain brand of car that they always have trouble with. Okay, note to self, I'm going to not do that because that's the brand that they have the most problems with. That's the idea of the influence that comes through an oikocentric relationship, through somebody that's very close to you in proximity. You have the ability to influence them. Okay, so that sets the stage. The mission of the church is to prepare the people in the church so that they are equipped to minister effectively to the people that God has put in their life. That's the whole premise. That's what High Desert Church is all about. So then what we did is we took that principle and those realities and we said, okay, knowing that this is the mission of the church, what exactly are we trying to accomplish when it comes to the events that we promote? How do we categorize what things we should promote at a high level? You'll see that on this chart here, a high level, a medium level, and a low level. The high level, these are going to be what we call oikocentric tools. These are events or programs that are particularly geared toward other people inviting their friends, their family, their oikos to this event. So sometimes we would have what I would call attractional events. These are events that are specifically designed to be compatible to an invitation. That's what we're trying to do here, is we're trying to invite people to the church through an event or a program like this. So what we did is we went through and we identified what are the communication channels that someone would leverage if their event fell into this category, and then what are the events that we could see fit as this type of an event. We also created a tagline to make it a little bit easier for us to understand what event fell into each category. So a high oikocentric tool, the tagline here, or the phrase that we would say, I can use this to invite my oikos. This is an event that would give me the opportunity to extend an invitation to somebody outside the church. That's what defines it. In terms of a medium tool, we've labeled those as growth tools. This helps me grow into a more effective world changer. Again, I'm referencing the language that was used often at High Desert Church. So this event, it's not something I would invite somebody to, But it is very important because it helps me grow into becoming more effective as a world changer. The last category here we would consider to be low promotion. This is just HDC information. This is stuff that's good for the internal body to understand and have awareness of. Examples here, these are study trips. We're not going to do a huge promotion because it's a very high barrier to entry. And also we can only handle a few people signing up. So that would be it's good for HDC to know that this is something that happens. Moving to the medium tools here, you would get an announcement. You get printed in the bulletin. We called it the program. You'd get a social media plan. You get a video in some cases, depending on the nature of what it is that we're asking for in terms of the opportunity itself. You're going to get a website, not a full-on website, but like a page on our website. You're going to get Info Hub information. This was a single destination that we had created called the Info Hub. It's called something different now, but the idea was this is where everything can be located for those who are a part of what we're doing as an organization. And then the types of events, we had some educational tools or some educational classes here. They lived in these are really good growth tools for our congregation. That's what this category existed to encompass. You also had things like membership. You also had serve opportunities. You had a parenting conference, things like that we viewed to be growth-oriented tools. And then the high promotion, you can see that the level of communication increased with each of these different tiers. An independent stuff piece. The mandate here was that it was an invite piece. We created a template that was perforated. And so you don't just get one card, you actually get two. And the idea is you tear it off and you give it to somebody that you're connected to, someone in your oikos. We were prompting missional movement and missional behavior in the way that we designed the pieces that were going to be sent out. That's what we were trying to do. We're trying to remind the congregation, not just that it fell on this tier of our promotional strategy, but it was meant to be leveraged this way alongside the mission of the organization. And you see the other things that were included there. You could see that there is more. You get more each time you move up in a tier. So what's the value of something like this? At the end of the day, the value of this is that it helps everyone know what to expect. Something that I'm seeing today that I think is a really smart movement is when you get categorized as the tier of event that you are, a low, a medium, or a high in the case of this case study, you're also going to get a list of the things that encompasses. And you can see that that's included here in a way in terms of communication channels. I'm seeing churches go a step further, though, and actually say you're getting a social media post, or you're getting 3 posts, or you're getting, 1 post on Instagram, 3 reels, and a YouTube short. They're really pushing the specifics of what you're getting so that ministry leaders are not left in the dark. One of the areas of tension that creeps in churches often is a ministry leader comes to the creatives and says, we need to promote this. And then it becomes very abstract very quickly. What is the comm team going to come up with? What is the solution? Is it going to be enough? Am I going to feel like it's enough? What happens if they deliver, but they deliver less than I think they should? What if this plan is slightly different than another plan? So that's on the ministry leader side. There's stress, there's tension, there's a lack of clarity. But then on the creative side, it's like, I have 19 events that came in this week. How am I supposed to build a promotional strategy for each one of them? It's just too much. I don't have time to do this. Also, we have to execute on all these things. So what's happening is we're really standardizing the approach. So we're saying if your event is a low promotion event, you're going to get these 4 things. That's what you're getting. So in the case of this, you're going to get a bulletin announcement. It's going to be in the program or in the bulletin. It means that you're going to get a social media plan. You're going to get a landing page, which means we'll create a page for you on the website so that you can direct people for information. And it's going to be on the Info Hub. You're not going to get an announcement from the weekend stage as an event like this. You're going to be present on the weekend because you're in the bulletin or whatever solution it is that you offer. They're in the app, they're on the website in terms of announcements. You're in the weekly email, for example, those types of things. That's what you're getting. So now when we have this conversation to say, this is helpful information for people at HTC to know, but it's not stuff necessarily that helps them grow in their faith or grow to be a more effective world changer on mission, or it's not something that you can invite your oikos to. You fall in this category, now you know exactly what you're going to get. What we're doing here is we're providing a crazy amount of clarity around what the ministry leader should expect. So now the tension on the ministry leader side is gone. I know exactly what I'm going to get. And I know that every event in this category gets it. So I'm not getting singled out or I'm not getting a reduction in the way that promotion happens. This is the agreed upon standard of what I get, and so that's what I'm going to get. And then on the comm leader side, I don't have to create a custom comm plan for every single event that ever comes. Everything is clear. On the ministry leader side, I know what I'm getting. On the communications leader side, I know what I'm doing. So now we can just skip the negotiations altogether. Two things happen when we remove negotiation from the table. The comm leaders don't feel like they're a constant disappointment, and the ministry leaders don't feel like they're constantly getting shortchanged by creative leaders who don't know what they're doing. As you're thinking through this idea of, do we need a promotional schedule or a promotional calendar? My contention is absolutely you do, because it gives so much clarity, specifically in the areas where tension lives. Now, what should it look like? This is an example, as what you could see at the Lunchtime Heroes page in the case study. You can see an example of what that might look like. What we're going to look at next week, which I've already alluded to, we're going to look at a deeper run on how this can look and how this can be woven into the fabric of your organization. Personally, I think the deeper that you can go, the better. You're going to be way better off, because each time you go deeper, you're going to gain more and more clarity. Every time you add clarity, you remove the opportunity for disagreement and tension to form in the relationships on your church staff.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Leading Healthy Creative Teams. This podcast is just one of the ways Lunchtime Heroes helps build healthy creative teams in the church. Stay up to date on the latest by signing up for the Creative Bites email at lunchtimeheroes.co.